Been a journey. It's been a real journey. I mean, for the time I was born, growing up in a broken situation.
And when you say broken, what do you mean?
My dad, my biological dad, he signed away his rights, got in illegal trouble before I was born, so my dad wasn't in the picture. And then
Okay.
I was born in a situation where my mom had, well, I'm the oldest, but I have five siblings. We all have different dads. And so growing up in and out of different homes and a lot of chaos, a lot of brokenness that ultimately led me to a place where I would just look up and just say, what did I do to deserve
Right.
this? I looked at my friends at school and the couple times I went to church growing up, and I'm like, these people have a different life than I do. And
You
yet
noticed the difference.
I did.
What
And
What did you notice, Ken?
I mean, really, it felt like I had different personalities or almost like different lives because I was one person at school, I was a different person at home, I was a different person in my grandparents. Just because of the nature of it, I had to be a different person in each of those rooms that I was in. And it left me confused. I felt very empty. I felt lonely, hopeless. And it led to me getting into all kinds of trouble and making a lot of unhealthy choices as a kid. By the time I was 8, 9 years old, I started using substances for the first time.
When you were 8,
I drank alcohol and
where did you get it from?
just the neighborhood I grew up in. So I grew
Okay.
up in poverty. I grew up in a Section 8 community.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to get into things that weren't healthy, there were
You
more than
could.
enough options. And really, the way I explain it is it's like life was so chaotic. It felt like there was all this noise. And when I used substances as a kid, it quieted the noise. And it opened the door to a really, really tough journey. And long story short, throughout my teen years, went through a lot more trauma. The couple of people who were like the rocks in my life were my grandparents.
Okay.
I had a grandmother and then my nana. They're both my grandparents. My nana is still alive today. I wouldn't know God. I wouldn't be alive without her.
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But my other grandmother, who was also like a place of comfort and a safe space for me, she passed away when I was 13.
Okay.
And then my grandfather, the gentleman who taught me how to drive and some of the basics of life, he lost his life as well when I was 13. Someone murdered him, and so it was a lot at once from the trauma, the emotional abuse, the physical abuse, losing people that I loved. By the time I was 13 years old, I was totally, I would say, lost, just wandering. Didn't have a direction, had big desires, dreams, but it didn't seem accomplishable or
So through all,
feasible.
so through all that, you had dreams.
100%.
No way.
I mean, as a kid, like I would listen to, you remember the Walkman CD
Yes.
players, the no skip ones, the real nice ones.
Yes.
I'd
I
s-
remember it said no skip on the front. No
yes, I'd sit
skip.
there and listen to music at night a lot of times and would just dream of a day that I could help people who were hurting like I was hurting. And I didn't
Oh,
know
and how
why.
old were you?
I was a kid. I mean, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, I was hurting myself,
So even
but I wanted to
through
help.
even through the midst of all that had took place, you still had dreams and wanted to help others.
I believe it was a seed that was in me from the time I was born, and I believe it's my purpose. I couldn't see that then. Back then, I would get angry with God and say, "Why is my life like this? Why? What did I do to deserve
But
this?"
that,
But it was a part of
yes,
molding me
a
into who
seed.
I am.
I love that you said a seed.
And it was this belief that one day when I'm big enough, I'm going to help. I'm going to fight for people. And like I went through a lot of physical, emotional abuse as a kid, and that was always my feeling is that when I can fight for others, I'm going to fight with all I got to make sure that people don't hurt like I had to. And, it took me years of struggling to get there. And my teenage years were really, really rough. I My stepdad, so after all that happened, my grandparents,
Okay.
my stepdad went to Iraq. My mom, beautiful, strong, awesome person, but has her battles or struggles. And we went through a really tough season. She fell deep into some mental health struggles. Like I said, my stepdad wasn't there,
How old were you around this time?
13, 14.
Okay.
And it opened the door to all kinds of things I never thought I'd do. Like I had these dreams as a kid growing up, but then it turned into something totally different. And ended up falling deep into amphetamine addiction, opioid addiction, all kinds of other substances, ultimately trying to fill a void. And that's how I see it now, is we all have this God-sized hole in us, and we try to fill it with whatever we can. And we'll use money, we'll use relationships, substances, even good things like work or family. Like if we find all of our identity and our purpose, our value in those things, they will fall short. So we have to find our purpose in something so much bigger and objective. And that's, I believe, the God who made us. I believe that's the key, is the one who made us. And until we encounter him, have a relationship with him, and I'm not a religious person by any means. I think the church, and I say that like as a body of people, not like buildings, have historically not done the best job of helping people who are struggling with mental health crises and substance use and poverty and life controlling issues. They're quick to preach to their soul, but not serve them tangibly and physically and help them. And so I believe that we need to ignite that belief in people, that by connecting them to the God who made them, not for religious purposes, not to reshape the way we talk, what we wear, what we do, none of that, but to connect to the one who made us, which is where our value, our purpose, our beauty, and all the differences we have, it all comes from him. And so that was really the turning point in my life.
Okay. So the two key things that I'm getting out of this is, one, do you believe God plants a seed in everyone?
I do, and I believe that every human being has a purpose and has a calling, whatever you want to call it,
Okay.
but has gifts. And
Okay.
honestly, throughout my personal experience and as well as my professional experience working in the behavioral healthcare field, because now I've been in recovery almost 12 and a half years, so time has gone quick. But just, what was the question again? I'm sorry, I just got off track.
No, you're good, because it's such a broad. I mean, the conversation's so good. I see how that happened.
Yeah.
Do you think everyone has a seed?
Yes.
You answered it. You said it.
Yeah, so I believe that the most gifted, beautiful people have also the greatest battles. I believe that. And those of us who have been through trauma and have been stretched and pulled and brought to that place of being broken have something in us that not a lot of people do. Not everyone has, especially those who can go through so much hurt and come out of it on the other side
Yes.
stronger because
Yes.
of it. We have something that the world needs. And so people who today, right now as we're talking, like people are sitting in their homes, in their cars, in a shelter, wherever they may be, not knowing where to turn. They don't know what to do. They can't imagine that things are going to get better. And my message to them is that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. A rain cloud doesn't stay over one house forever.
Yes.
There is purpose in their suffering, because we suffer, we go through stuff, and we feel like it's endless, and there is no purpose in it, but there truly is. And so much of life, though, is perspective.
Okay.
And we can choose to be a victim to our circumstances, or we can build the life that we truly want. And I believe that we all possess that ability to create, to have ideas and dreams and visions, and then actually make it real.
Yes.
I believe that every human has that capacity,
Okay.
but we get so hurt and bogged down, and there's so much hurt in the world that our belief that things could be better becomes tainted. And
Totally agree.
people hurting.
Yes. And then to come back around to the void you were speaking of, all carry that void, and that's part of life is us to. What is the void part about? If you, yeah, if you could talk about that, just however.
Yeah, so I think the void looks different for different people. I think we're all born with it in one sense or another, or we go through things.
I feel the same way. It wasn't until you just said that now that I think about it, I think we, yeah, maybe not all, but I kind of want to say I think that's on here, and then it's like you have to, yeah,
We have that in common,
yes,
like as humans. Like
yes,
we know that what we see can't be all of it, especially those of us who have been through a lot of struggle.
yes,
If life is all that we see, then what's the purpose in it at all?
right,
And when we start to ask that question, and then especially once we get the answer, because that's the key thing for me is I was angry, bitter, broken. I've said that word so many times, and walked through the doors of a treatment facility when I was 18 years old. And I was in legal trouble, mental health crises, substance use, had dropped out of high school, had been homeless. I mean, like you name it. And I was struggling with it. And I realized that everything I'd been trying, relationships, money, whatever it is, only left me more empty. But when I surrendered, and that's the key thing, surrendered to something greater than myself. And I would word that as the God of all creation, the God who made us. And which is a hard thing for people to wrap their mind around. It was a hard thing for me because when you see the depths of brokenness in the world, it's like, God, how can you allow this? Where are you? And what we don't realize a lot of times is that God is the only good thing. He is steadily good. He is always good. He's faithful. The world that we live in is broken a lot of times because of people, and hurt people hurt people.
yes,
And I could have been one of those people to continue the cycle and hurt more people just like I was hurt. But when God grabbed a hold of me, that's what changed. That anger, that bitterness, that loneliness, that despair, it changed to life and hope and love and joy. And it was like
when did
things.
you have that moment?
I was 18 years old when I went into that program. I actually went through a program called Adult and Teen Challenge. We have a local campus here in Flint
And
called
your
Life Challenge.
Nana guided you there.
My nana, yeah.
So that's the part that amazes me is that how we have spoke about this before. It's like you said, the people who face a lot of trauma go through stuff, but it's like your Nana. Then you go to where'd you go? Where's that place?
It's called Adult and Teen Challenge. It was in, actually, it was Dare Challenge. It's in the Outer Banks, North Carolina.
Okay.
And it was about 3 hours from where I'm from. So it was 4 months there and then 10 months in Pennsylvania. I'd never been to Pennsylvania. So it was scary. I mean, I'm leaving everything that I knew to change my life, transform my life. I didn't know what that was going to look like, but it was 14 months. And throughout that year and a couple months, it changed the rest of my life. Like I said, it was like all the bitterness, the anger, it was replaced with something else.
Well, that's another thing that amazes me about honestly, yes, God, because like how your Nana was there to point you to the next direction. Like you get like it's like whoa.
I'm very blessed in that sense. I've thought about that a lot over the years and how when people don't have a support system, it's so much more difficult to get up and out of it, to transcend it, to heal. And that's my heart, is to be the support system for people. Because in my lowest moment, I called my nana. And I didn't talk to my nana in years because I knew if I didn't have anything good to call her about, I had no business calling her. But when I called her, she had miraculously heard about this program like a couple weeks before. And it was just the right time, right place. Everything came
Yes.
together. But it was after, I mean, legitimately 18 years of suffering and struggling. Because from the time I was a little baby, it was a battle. And so after all that struggle, I finally saw the purpose, and it was to help people. And that's what I've committed my life to doing, is to help
Yes.
people.
So, and we spoke about this before, do you think that all that struggle you went through for those 18 years, was it for something, like a reason behind it?
1,000,000%. It wasn't just by chance. I don't believe that, and I know I've talked about God a lot, but I don't believe God caused it. I believe He allowed it for a purpose. And and that was the big shift from me being angry with God toward realizing that He was going to use it all for a greater purpose.
Yes.
And people who have been through struggle can connect with people who know struggle.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the key to everything, is relationships with people we can
Can
relate
you say
with.
that just one more time? Because yes.
Well, so everything I believe is the relationship, the connection. So people who have been through struggle can connect with people who also know struggle.
Yes. Absolutely.
And when you look at like a crisis situation, if someone is struggling with depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar condition, or substance use, it's like it's so overwhelming to even like think about our next step or like what's going to come, because we're so bogged down by it, and we're like, nobody can connect with us. Like, nobody knows what I'm going through. When somebody who sits in front of us, who has felt those things, who felt the feelings of not wanting to continue. I spent more than half of my life feeling like I wanted to give up, not wanting to live, not because I wanted to hurt anyone else or anything like that, but just because I wanted to be done fighting. I was so tired, and I felt like the harder I tried, the worse things got. And then I felt like I was alone in that. But then when I realized that that feeling is actually really common, that a lot of people feel alone,
Yes.
even though we may see smiles on their faces and
Yes.
things are good, deep down they're hurting. And so to normalize the conversation around it, I think is the key, so that we have more people who have been through it speak up about it, because mental health is relevant to us all.
Yes.
Every person, whether we're in a season of thriving right now, it may not last forever. We may have a season of struggling to come, but just because we're in a season of struggling doesn't mean that's going to last forever.
Yes.
And the more people we bring to the table to talk about it, and we realize that it transcends all religious or religions, socioeconomic statuses, races, ethnicities, on and on, geographic locations, like whatever, it's common. We're all hurting. And even though we may not be hurting right now, there will be a time in our life, or there has been a time in our life where we were. And so I think we got to be a lot more full of grace with
Okay.
each other, and love and mercy and understanding, because we expect so much of people, but then we are quick to forget about the seasons of our life where we struggled. And if we can understand the love that was shown to us in our greatest moments of need, then that helps us love people in their greatest moments of need.
So you went through the program, and how did that go for you?
It was awesome. I mean, it was hard.
Okay.
I'd say the hardest thing I've ever done in my whole life, because of all the ways that I was conditioned throughout my whole upbringing. I had to change everything. And that was overwhelming at the beginning, because I'm like, okay, I know where I want to get in life. I know I've got a long road to
Okay.
walk to get there.
So what are some things that someone who may have indulged in some type of drugs or been through a lot of trauma, some of the things that you mentioned, how do you kind of get how do you get on the right path, the right track? 'Cause
That's
it
a
is
big
overwhelming.
question. That's a big question. So one of the most important things is to open up with the right people.
Open up with the right people.
And some people will really help you if you open up. Some people will not. And that's important to know. And if someone opens up with a person and they're not helped, don't let that discourage them from opening up with someone else, because you may have to talk with a few people before you find the right person. But that's the first thing.
Okay.
Let's face it. Let's talk about it
Okay.
with a ton of grace and a ton of love. Once we do that, then we start to realize ways that the trauma has shaped us. And then we have to start facing some truths about ourselves, like the things we feel aren't true. After a life of so much pain, especially emotional pain, I lived through the lens of how I felt. And if I woke up and I felt depressed or I felt down or like because that's how I describe depression. Depression feels like everything in the world is falling apart, even though it's not. Like I have the same life today as I had yesterday, but today I could feel depressed, and it's like spiral, like chaos. And so what I had to learn is feelings versus truth. But when we're raised in a lot of hurt and a lot of brokenness, our understanding of truth is so distorted
Gotcha.
because we start to believe these lies that we're not lovable or that we're not capable or that we don't deserve it or that whatever the lie is. And so we have to actually retrain ourselves to think a different way, that we are capable, that there is purpose in life, that there's purpose for everything you've been through. And so it's really taking the lies and replacing them with truth.
Gotcha.
And then what happens, because those days of struggling with depression aren't just going to go away. So when they come, if we have a bunch of tools in our tool bag, so we have our statements of truth, our things that we believe no matter how we feel, then we can actually train our brain to use a different portion of our brain to experience gratefulness and joy and happiness instead of depression, sadness, worry, anxiety, all those things. So that's like a first step is to face it, to talk about it, and then to retrain our brains.
Okay.
Also, being open to medical help, I think, is really, really important. And I fought with this for a long time
Okay.
because I had bad experiences with medication. And medications are good when used correctly and properly for mental health, for like
Okay.
depression and anxiety. But some medications will make people feel worse. And that was my experience growing up because I struggled with these things. They would send me to a doctor, a counselor. I'd get very little out of the counseling. The medication would make me feel worse. And I'm like, I don't want anything to do with that. So I ran from it for years, the idea of actually taking a medication to help with depression and anxiety. But now I've actually found the right medications,
Yes.
which help stabilize me so that I don't have as many of those ups and downs, very steady. And so that has helped me tremendously. Also, getting plugged into community is really, really important. We need to feel like we belong. And if we don't belong somewhere, then our experience in life is not as beautiful. And that's why, like the way I grew up, the loyalty and the love that I got from all the people that I ran with, all those years I was doing the wrong things, that's why we did it, because we belonged.
Yeah.
We connected. We had things in common.
Yes.
Like, so what do we do when we come out of struggle and all these people we love, and this happens all the time, are battling the same things that we've been battling? We want to transcend it, we want to get out of it, but we also don't want to leave the people we love.
So how did you handle that?
That was a tough one, especially for my mom. So my mom, she became pregnant with me when she was 17, gave birth to me when she was 18, so we kind of grew up together. And it was hard for me to leave her because I protected her always, like physically. If she needed something, I would always be there for her. And so me going to get help, I'm like, I'm leaving my mom. And that's how I felt. And through some wisdom from other people speaking in my life, and then just the grace of God gave me peace about it, I realized I couldn't, and this is cliche, but it's true, I could not help anyone I loved until I helped myself. And I needed to have a strong foundation and be able to stand on my own 2 feet and do what I needed to do, which ultimately years later allowed me to give back to my community. Today allows me to be a person that my mom calls or my siblings call when they have a need. And I'm really grateful for that because I was in the trenches with them for so many years with no hope. And now I'm so thankful to be a person my family calls for hope, and get emotional about that because it was a long time that I didn't think
Yeah.
that day would ever come.
Oh wow. So prior to us recording, you mentioned how like we have goals and dreams sometimes, but like you said, if you were to get all this money, like would you be a good steward over that money?
Hmm.
Talk about that, how like there's a season or there's seasons through life where I think we all kind of go through that growing stage.
That's true. It's been a process for me. So when I came out of the struggles that I was in and started to grow, build a new life, these dreams and visions I had as a kid to help people actually became real. Like now I had the pathway to help people.
Okay.
And I ended up getting my GED, then I went to college, and with the mindset of we're going to transform the world. We're going to change the way people get help in hospitals and counseling centers and jails and prisons and all these different touch points. And I see ways we can do it better because I grew up in the system. Now I get to work on the system, and I was fired up, ready to go. And then I realized though that it's hard to create deep, deep change. And yet I have this big vision. It's not going to happen overnight. And that's another thing as a person who has gone through a lot of struggle, is instant gratification. We want what we want when we want it, how we want it. And that's a big part of it too, is it's not many times going to look like we think it's going to look, or the process isn't going to go the way we want it to go. And it's actually going to be super uncomfortable. And growth comes through uncomfortability and that stretching, that molding. And so even my kids, they have big dreams. And I tell them, you're going to have to go through 10, 20 years, 30 years, maybe 40 years of preparation, of
Okay.
building character. Hmm.
You such a huge statement. I think people, I don't know if it's like a new millennial cool thing or when people think they're just gonna, like, here's my goal and dream, I'm gonna do it. But no, and honestly, that's what I have learned is that no, you're gonna have that seed, like how you had it. You know it's something, it's gonna come about. Honestly, I have rushed my goals and dreams, and I've been like, yo, why isn't this happening? And almost doubted them, like, okay, because it's like you got confirmation, you have it deep within your spirit, you can feel it,
Yes.
and it's like, when is it gonna manifest? Like when? Honestly, Ken, you're telling the truth. I say the same thing to my daughter all the time. I tell
Yeah.
her, I said, you're gonna have some times in life it's gonna be hard. It's
Yeah.
going to be hard.
Yep.
Keep going.
Yep.
That is so true.
And that's perspective, So many times we can choose that. Like we can choose to get discouraged or bogged down by it because we're not where we want to be.
Yes.
But to realize that who we are today, I can't remember who said this, maybe Morgan Freeman said it, but
Okay.
he's like, who we are today is only a fraction of who we're becoming. And so if we don't have all that we want, it's because we aren't all that we're going to be.
Oh, so good, Ken.
So once we become
Yes.
the person that we are going to be, we'll have
Yes.
the character, the gifts, the tools we need to steward it well.
Yes.
And with a great platform comes great responsibility. And so if our desire is to transform the world or help people on a very large scale, the responsibility that comes along with that is very big.
You
And
have to be like super seasoned.
we have to learn.
Yes.
Yes.
Like all the way around, like seriously. Like mind, body, and spirit, emotionally, dealing with people, Ken, dealing with us. Like, oh my, I can't believe you understand that.
I wouldn't say I fully understand
Okay.
it. And that's the other thing too, is I don't claim to have like all the answers. And that's
Gotcha.
been a big thing for me in walking this out, is like learning, maintain a posture of
Yes.
like I'm open-minded.
Yes.
I don't want to have a picture of what my life's going to look like, and then if it doesn't look like that, then I'm discouraged. I want to be very open
Yes.
to how things go, how things flow.
Yes.
And also just understand that I'm learning.
Yes.
I'm going to learn the rest of my life, and I love that. I love that I don't have to have it all figured out, or have to have all the answers, or have to
But
function at
Ken, you have to
110%.
admit, you have that understanding. Might not look. It takes this much time. Like, because for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, by the time I'm 26, 28, I'm gonna be like, I'm 31 now. And it's my dreams and goals are not what I'm making it in a way that I never thought. Like, oh, that's why
Yes.
I
Yes.
wasn't ready.
And
I'm
then
not.
the
Yeah.
relationships too. Like I've had so many seasons of life where something wasn't coming together,
Yes.
but then just give it time. You'll meet the right person
Yes.
at the right time to open a door. And so just finding peace in the process.
Peace in the process.
Yeah.
Finding peace in the
And being
process.
content, being
Yes.
happy, being open, choosing to overcome, choosing to
Okay.
create, build the life we
Yes.
want. Get around good people. That's been the biggest thing for
Get
me.
around good people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk real about
Okay.
things. And yeah, we gotta change the narrative around this stuff.
Yeah.
There's so many people hurting. Actually, it's over 20 million people in America struggle with substance use. Many, many more than that struggle with mental health. And yet we stigmatize it. We look down on it.
Yeah.
Why? And I think that's because a lot of us think too much of ourselves. And I think we should make ourselves smaller in our own minds because
Yeah.
that will help us love people more.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I know throughout your journey, at one point, as you're rebuilding this new life, like you have a family, your wife, your children, I know you had a business that was doing wonderful, but for some reason you decided to come down to Flint. What part of your journey was that about? Like, why did you take that leap of faith? Why did you do that?
As you're talking, I'm thinking like there's so many layers to my story I haven't talked about. So, in recovery over 12 years now, I've lived in Pennsylvania,
Okay.
North Carolina,
Yes.
Michigan, but I've worked in more states than that, New York and New Jersey and Virginia. And it's just been a real journey of being open
Okay.
to where God wants us. And so I had a for-profit business soon after I entered recovery. Few years of building that, I was like, that I didn't go through all that I did in life to just build something for myself. It's
Okay.
got to be bigger than myself. It's got to be about helping people.
Okay.
And so I ended up leaving the for-profit world to get into the nonprofit
So you
side of
still
things.
your void wasn't filled at that point either with that business. It
It
was
wasn't.
successful.
It was very successful financially, but I just had this void in my soul. I wasn't helping people. And I mean, I was helping people, but not to the extent that I wanted to. And so walked away from that, like took a huge, huge pay cut. My wife was fully supportive and got into the nonprofit world, the behavioral health care field and working with treatment
Were you
providers.
led
And
to do that? Did you just feel like you said in your
100%,
spirit?
100%.
Was it hard
was
for
a
you to
God
let
thing.
go of that business?
It was, but it was for a greater purpose. I had peace though.
You had peace about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing with going through life. Even though something may not make sense logically, you'll have peace in your gut about it, and so you got to trust
Can you
that
say
that
that
feeling.
one more time?
So, well, I don't know exactly how I said it, but
Yes, because you said even if it doesn't make sense logically.
yes, even if it doesn't make sense logically, God will give you a peace about it in your soul.
Did you ever have a point in your life where you had to explain or be logical to people, or because see, you were blessed to have your wife on your side, but was there ever a time where you felt like you had to explain okay, it's not logical, or
Oh yeah, people have looked at us like we're crazy for moving all over and just kind of going with the journey. When we moved, actually, I mean to back up, like my wife moved from Flushing, right outside of Flint, to college in Northeast Pennsylvania, which is where we met. And her family called her crazy. Like, why are you going 10 hours away to go to this little college? You should go to University of Michigan or one of the
I
big
can
schools
relate
here.
to that.
And back then she would have told you she felt like she had to explain herself and all that, but she followed that gut feeling.
The gut feeling.
Yes. Where she knew she was supposed to go.
Yes.
Ended up turning out we met, had our babies, and the rest
Look
is
at it,
history.
yeah.
But just following, being willing to follow
Was it hard for
that
you to
lead.
explain that logic, or did you ever feel pressure, or
So it's tough for me to answer that question because
Okay.
I'm not the biggest people pleaser. Whereas like my wife is more of a people pleaser than I am, which opposites attract, and
Yes.
that's why relationships are so beautiful. But I really don't put a whole lot of stock into people's perception of what I'm doing.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that's because of the way I grew up. I think life's too short to base what I do off of people's feelings about what I'm doing.
Gotcha.
Because if I know my feelings aren't true, I know their feelings aren't true, so who cares?
Yes.
So let's base it off of
Yes.
truth, objectivity, things that matter to us, our value system, more than the way people feel about it. And so we've moved states, we've had to, leave different networks of people to go serve a different network and have people challenge us on that. But I think the key thing is following that bigger purpose no matter what.
Yes.